Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to World This Morning. I am your host Hajra Sati, and today is Monday and we are kick-starting our day with renewed energy. So guess what? I wanted to talk about a collective Muslim effort, especially in the modern times, because you really don't come across such kind of efforts. So I wanted to talk about the Hamidiya Hijaz railway station. So Sultan Abdul Hamid II had this vision, grand vision and very pragmatic vision of establishing a railway line. So just imagine that you're boarding a train in the Istanbul station, then you're crossing Sana'a, you're crossing Damascus, Jerusalem, Hijaz, and then you finally end up in Yemen. And within the railway compartments, there are separate compartments for the women, there are separate compartments for offering the prayers, and within each station, there's a separate mosque which is integrated with a local time to offer the prayers. And there are also quarantine centers, and there are also healthcare centers where you can provide the healthcare efforts to the very needy people, to the people who are the travelers. So this sort of the vision was envisioned by Sultan Abdul Hamid II, and it is also envisioned or manifested in a pop culture, in a drama called Sultan Abdul Hamid II, which is also being broadcasted on PTV Home. And this sort of a vision also revolutionized how people saw it, and the funding for such kind of the project came from a very non-Ottoman empires, because Ottoman empires were not doing very financially well in those times. So imagine people in the Lahore and the Hyderabad from the subcontinent, Muslims were running the campaigns to secure the funding for such kind of an ambitious project. And they also envisioned that in the newspapers that were running. So one of the person known as Insha'Ullah, he also had this newspaper called Al-Watan based in the Lahore, and he used to run the campaign there, and he used to eulogize the people who were actually contributing to such kind of a grand ambitious fund. But guess what? There were a lot of troubles also in this project, because there are a lot of people who provided protection to the people who were traveling in the caravans, because the Hajj time was reduced from 40 days till 2 days, right? So that's such an achievement. So the people who were providing protections to the caravans, their security economy was busted, so they revolted against this protocol. So this railway line, and Sultan Abdul Hamid II has to provide more security for the people who were building up this railway line. So you can also find their locomotives still in Hijaz, in their museums, and some of the locomotives have been converted into the restaurants. So I really wanted to talk about it. So it's 24th of October, and a lot of days are converging on this day, on the 24th of October. So coming to the top stories, today is World Polio Day, which is being observed with a commitment to raise awareness for the vaccination and eradication of the disease. The day provides an opportunity to highlight global efforts towards a polio-free world and honor the tireless contributions of those on the front lines in the fight to eradicate polio from every corner of the globe. Polio is a crippling and a potentially deadly infection disease caused by poliovirus that invades the brain and spinal cord, causing paralysis. The virus spreads from person to person and only affects humans. Children are especially susceptible because polio has no cure. Vaccination is the only way to protect children and stop the disease from spreading. And in Pakistan, we have seen very vigorous sort of a campaign to eradicate the polio, because why polio is prevalent in Pakistan and Afghanistan and in one other country. So the world is making sure that this disease is eliminated, is eradicated from the global scenario. So moving on to another day that we are observing today, which is on this day back in 1945, the UN Charter entered into force. UN Day, celebrated every year, offers the opportunity to amplify its common agenda and reaffirm the purposes and principles of UN Charter that have guided the world body for the past 76 years. To mark a day, a concert was held in the General Assembly Hall at the United Nations headquarters in New York. So imagine, my professor used to say that we can't imagine living in a world without the United Nations. So, and also we have the message of the Secretary General Antonio Guterres about this day in 2022.
The United Nations is the product of hope. The hope and resolve following the Second World War to move beyond global conflict to global cooperation. Today, our organization is being tested like never before. But the United Nations was made for moments like these. Now more than ever, we need to bring to life the values and principles of the UN Charter in every corner of the world. By giving peace a chance and ending conflicts that jeopardize lives, futures and global progress. By working to end extreme poverty, reduce inequalities and rescue the Sustainable Development Goals. by safeguarding our planet, including by breaking our addiction to fossil fuels and kickstarting the renewable energy revolution, and by finally balancing the scales of opportunity and freedom for women and girls and ensure human rights for all. As we mark UN Day, let us renew our hope and conviction in what humanity can achieve when we work as one in global solidarity.
Right, so we can't imagine a world where we can live without the United Nations, because United Nations has been so much ingrained into our life. Obviously, it has its fair share of failures, but I think the successes or the system that it has devised is very commendable, right? So moving on to another day which is being celebrated today is the Azad Jammu and Kashmir Foundation Day. The 75th founding day of Azad Jammu and Kashmir is being celebrated today with a renewed pledge to continue the struggle until the liberation of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and the accession of the whole territory to Pakistan. The founding day is celebrated in commemoration of the freedom from the Dogra regime on 24th of October in 1947. Special prayers will be offered in mosques for the integrity and prosperity of Pakistan and early liberation of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Simple but impressive flag hoisting ceremonies will be held at all the districts and divisional headquarters. So, of course, we hope and pray that one day we are able to resolve this issue amicably, and the Kashmir people, their voices are being listened to, which is their accession to Pakistan. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just these 3 days which are observed today. It is also the week of the respiratory week, respiratory healthcare rather, I would say. And the theme of Respiratory Healthcare Week is the respiratory therapist, resilience, strength and hope. So what exactly is the respiratory therapy? Because I really don't know the concept of a therapy also in penetrating the field of respiratory. So we have someone in the studio who's going to explain the importance of that and also make sure that we observe it and we deal with the challenges surrounding it. So I'm very glad that we are joined by a guest who happens to be Katibur Rahman. He is a respiratory therapist. Assalamu alaikum and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so just explain the importance of today. Why even celebrate it or mark it?
Well, the Respiratory Therapy Day is celebrated in the last week of October from 23rd to 29th of October in the whole world. The importance of this week is especially your lungs health and the awareness and the teaching session regarding your pulmonary conditions and the critical conditions of your lungs. In this session, in this week, we can celebrate not only the respiratory therapist effort, but also educate the people who don't know about the conditions of the pulmonary system or the lungs and the conditions involved in the lungs. That's why we celebrate this week in the whole world. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, this is a little emerging field, but in the whole world, it is celebrated hugely.
Right, right. So we've also seen that respiratory therapy or the therapists, they are the unsung and the unrecognized heroes because they are doing a specific sort of a training, and especially in the COVID situation, we saw that there was a lot of healthcare emergency and the respiratory therapists were in the forefront of that. So how do you make sure that they are protected? Number one, your employees are protected, and also, what sort of therapy is being given to the patients out there?
Well, we are protected from different kind of PPEs like mask, N95 mask or other kind of equipment that are usually for specific disease or specific aerosol particle that are directly involved in our system. As you know that we are the front leaders and we are facing the critical conditions, especially recently we have faced the COVID situations. We are protected, as you know, we are working in the team. That's why different kind of protective measures we can apply in our ICU setup, in the whole hospital setups. And the second part, the respiratory therapy is not a primary domain to do the lung health. It's primarily depends on mainly 3 parts. One is your diagnostic therapy and the therapeutic therapy, and the last one is the pulmonary rehab. In the diagnostic therapy, we will mainly do and diagnose the lung disease and how to rule out the problems with the lung, especially your asthmatic or the COPD or the different conditions that can damage your lungs. In Pakistan, we have only few institutes which have diagnostic equipment and well-equipped respiratory therapists that can do or diagnose properly respiratory problems. But in the second part, respiratory therapy, what can actually we do, these are the compassionate and the healthcare worker who are working in the different setups in the hospital, like ICUs, emergency department, or in the OPD setup with different like surgery, after surgery complications, and the pulmonary conditions, especially in the ICUs, the patients who are on the mechanical ventilation, we can manage them. In the last part, we do awareness session, teaching programs, and different kind of activities that can help out the patients or the people who have the lung problems that can be managed.
Okay, so what exactly, when you talk about the awareness session, what exactly is the main component or the content or the strategy that is hinged around those sessions so that people can be made more aware for that?
In the respiratory care week, we not only celebrate the respiratory therapist effort, but actually we do to manage the different kind of problems, and especially the awareness and the teaching sessions that can people do in Islamabad or in Pakistan. We can do different kind of classes, especially on the respiratory system or the lungs condition. Or on the second part, we are in Islamabad, we have different hospital setup. We have arranged some kind of desk, information desk, and different kind of activities like you have spirometry or the lungs functioning test that can help out the people rule out the problem with their lungs, and also the problem concerning with their breathing issues.
Right, right. So when I was doing my research, I came across this concept or the equipment called the mechanical ventilator. So number one, how does it work? How is it linked to the respiratory therapy? And also, apart from the COVID, what functionalities it has?
Well, the mechanical ventilation is very broad term. In mechanical ventilation, we are dealing with the ventilator that are basically the artificial lungs or the ventilation that are provided artificially or those machines, some kind of instrument. In mechanical ventilation, it's not only role play in the COVID part, but also in other disease like you have pulmonary fibrosis or the COPD or asthmatic. The mechanical ventilation is very compulsory. Well, mechanical ventilation is an integral part of ICU setups as well as the respiratory therapy domain. In this domain, in this field, we can do not only put the patient on the ventilator, but also the manage how to manage different conditions on the mechanical ventilation, like you have asthma, COPD, and different kind of lung disease other than COVID, or you have some kind of neuromuscular disease in which your muscles got weakened. You need a mechanical ventilation.
Okay, so how can we make sure that the respiratory therapy, for example, you are saying that it's not very much well integrated into the Pakistani medical landscape, right? So if the hospitals do not have this technology or this technique, or the people who are doing actually this technique, which are the respiratory therapists, so how can we make sure that we can make it more accessible, this technology or this part of the medical sciences, to the people who are out there, especially in the rural areas who do not have that much vast access to the medical healthcare services?
Well, in Pakistan, different setup in private sector. They have respiratory therapists, well-educated respiratory therapists, well-trained, highly profiled. But in government sector, we have shortage of respiratory therapists. In government sector, we can announce some kind of vacancies regarding respiratory therapy, or you can avail any kind of opportunity, especially in the respiratory therapy program like masterclass or any other kind of respiratory care week. So we can avail from these kind of activities, and we can manage as per government sector.
Okay, so we have seen that with the rising inflation and the inflation which is going around the world, the social indicators are not looking very great in the today's global scenario. And we've also seen that healthcare is a sort of a thing which is a basic human right, but it is not there with everyone, with every individual in Pakistan and in the global scenario as a whole. So how can we make sure that the medical services are accessible to the people or the poor people, and what are some of the initiatives that the government has undertaken to make sure that the healthcare is made accessible to the commoners out there, to the poor people out there who otherwise cannot afford such kind of very luxurious or extravagant sort of expenses on the medical healthcare?
Well, in Pakistan, we can do different kind of organizing setup, like in the respiratory week we have arranged the respiratory information desk, while different kind of setup announced, different kind of government sector have come respiratory vacancy or respiratory options. In government setup, they have highly well set up equipment, but unfortunately they don't have any kind of professional skilled persons that can handle this kind of equipment and make the healthcare system more easier. So unfortunately in Pakistan there is a lot of problem regarding the respiratory issues, but we can try to fix it as per as needed basis.
So please do shed some light on the education and the respiratory therapy field and how it is integrated into the healthcare services.
Well, the education regarding the respiratory system, the students who are interested and the people who are interested in this domain, they can easily avail the bachelor program in different setup of universities like Islamabad, and you have Shifa universities or different sectors in Peshawar, Islamabad.
Right.
Education awareness regarding the problems They have different kind of seminars and awareness sessions which can avail and the patients make their life easier.
Right. Thank you so much for saying that. And having said so what if one does not have access to respiratory therapies? So how much of the damage can one do to your healthcare service? So what is the importance of not having access to that? So how much damage does it can pose to the healthcare system or the people who are in some sort of medical condition?
Well, lungs are the integral part of your whole body. So if the lungs get damaged, they can damage the other organ like your heart or any other kind of system. So they are interrelated to each other. If we can fix the lungs problem or we can manage the lungs problem as per international guidelines or as per the recommendation of healthcare practitioner, we can easily manage the whole problem regarding the critical conditions of the patient or regarding the scenarios. So it's very important to manage the lung disease as well as we can manage the cardiac problems or any other kind of issues.
So please shed some light on the lung diseases inside the Pakistan. So how much they are prevalent there, what is the ratio there, and how can we make sure to tackle such sort of diseases?
Well, in Pakistan, we are mainly facing lung disease like you have COPD, that is chronic pulmonary obstructive disease, which are mainly caused by smoking or any other sedation particles. And the second one is the most rising problem in Islamabad, especially that is asthma. Right. So we can manage differently on different steps, like you can have a nebulization therapy or you have aerosol therapy or you can also wear the smoking cessation program, which can purely help out the problem with these conditions.
Right. So in Islamabad, there's a lot of problem of the asthma, and we have seen that because of the trees, the blueberry trees, they are main cause of the asthma, and which were not very much there back 2-3 decades ago, but now because of the excessive growth of those trees, we are seeing the rise of the asthma and other respiratory issues, right? So what exactly can we do to make sure, apart from, of course, the trees are there, we can't do anything about that, but what exactly can we make sure, do to make sure that the asthma is being tackled and it's not affecting that many people in Islamabad?
Well, asthma is a very broad term. You have different types of asthma regarding your exercise-induced asthma. You have dust or the pollen and energy asthma. In Islamabad, this is a major problem regarding asthma that we cannot cut off the trees, and it's a big problem. We can use proper face masks or avoid those areas from where asthma can be triggered or can be stimulated. So we should prevent the preventive measures.
Right. And what are exactly the challenges that you faced when people come in, especially in the field of the respiratory therapy?
Being a respiratory therapist in Pakistan, there's a lot of issues in the government sector level, but in the private setup, it's very broadly, it's open for all of the healthcare professions. But in government sector, we are facing a lot of problem in Pakistan in different setup. When we go to somewhere, we introduce ourselves that we are respiratory therapists, and the people ask, who are you and what's your primary job? But in the whole world, in the United Nations or the USA, this is not the issue. The issue is with the concerning problems and the concerning issues.
Right. So what exactly do you say when people go out there and you tell them that you are a respiratory therapist? Because when I think about the therapy that comes into my mind is, for example, someone who has lost his limb or his hand or the arm or stuff like that, right? So people go to the therapy out there to make sure that they are walking or they are more rehabilitated. So what exactly is the response of the people when you go out there and you tell them the respiratory therapist?
Well, in Pakistan, different kind of opinions came when we go on the outside, especially in the government sector. They are mostly mixing with the physiotherapy or, as you said, the limb physio. But the main response that comes from the respiratory therapy is only regarding your lungs. But basically, it is not regarding your lungs. It's a whole broad term, different kind of rehab techniques, different kind of, you have diagnostic and therapy, as I clearly mentioned the previous question. So it's a bit challenging for all of us to face the people as a respiratory therapist and introduce yourselves. But in future, we will hope so that we are not facing with the problem, as it's an emerging field and advancement in the whole setup in Pakistan.
Right. So if someone wanted to avail the services, what do you call this therapy services, how much does it cost, and is it accessible to the poor people out there?
Well, especially in the respiratory care week, we have announced some kind of offer, some kind of percentage off on this kind of diagnostics. It's a bit difficult for the poor people who came and to diagnose this kind of problem. But again, this is the issues with the highly professional skills and the professional staff that is not available in the government sector. And that's a big problem regarding these issues. That's why poor people can't handle this or can't avail this kind of offer.
Right. And what exactly are the activities that your institution or the government undertakes during this respiratory care week?
Well, in the private sector, we had arranged different kind of setups in the different sectors of the healthcare system. Like in Shifa International Hospital, we had arranged different kind of classes activity that is specifically regarding your lungs health, your activities involving your lung awareness teaching sessions, and the mechanical ventilation and the problem facing the people who are on the patients who are on the mechanical ventilation and how to manage it and how to fix it.
Right, right. So we have seen that people do suffer from a lot of diseases, especially from the respiratory diseases, from the lungs diseases. What exactly we need to do to make sure that we do not suffer from such sort of conditions or diseases, and how much it is important to talk about such kind of issues?
Well, it's not a big deal that we can fix it up. We can take preventive measures from different kind of setups, like you can fix it from your protection activities, you can take a healthy diet, your sleep hygiene must be good. As you know, if someone is diabetic, you can control your diabetes. As far as same is the lungs condition, you can fix your lung by taking plenty of exercise, taking healthy diet and sleep hygiene. And the most important one is the smoking cessation program to avoid from smoking, and the stimulant or the allergic particles that can stimulate your particularly lung disease.
Right. So I really wanted to ask about what are exactly the symptoms of the lung diseases, and what are the indicators that we are into this disease, and make sure that they are not there in the first place.
Well, primarily it is the cough, or you have shortness of breath on your
Right.
daily activity, like when you go outside, up the stairs, that's you have shortness of breath, you can be a hypertension, your blood pressure can be go on the higher side, and the other way you have cough or kind of sputum production. These are the primarily these are the signs of the respiratory issues problem. You should go with the physician to just rule out the problem.
Right. And what are the kinds of the respiratory diseases that are there?
With these symptoms, we can rule out many kind of disease. Again, it's a pulmonary fibrosis, you have bronchiectasis, atelectasis, that are different kind of disease. Again, you have some diagnostic tests to rule out these kind of special disease.
Okay, thank you so much for shedding light on the Respiratory Therapist Week. And we have seen that there are a lot of respiratory diseases, and we need to make sure that with the symptoms that the therapists have mentioned here, we need to go out there in the healthcare setups, in the hospitals, and to make sure that we rule out some, because early detection is the first phase in tackling the disease, right? So with this, we are going out on a short break, and when we come back, we have a very interesting segment to say, so don't go out well. Welcome back, and today we are going to talk about the youth development. And while it is important even to acknowledge the demographic factor called youth, because Pakistan's 60% of the population falls under the category of the youth. Youth can be a ticking bomb or a demographic gift, depends upon how you channelize their energies and how you make sure that they are very dynamic in this very fastly changing, very digitalized world of the 21st century. To talk more about the youth and the development, we have someone in the studio who happens to be not only the motivational speaker, who also happens to be a writer, and he will guide us and explain us that why is it important to shed light on the role of the youth development and why we need to undertake it. So I'm very glad that we are joined by Asif Nazir. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Walaikum salam, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Right. So I wanted to ask how to develop young, dynamic, young people who are ready out there to tackle the challenges which are posed by the very 21st century, and how to adapt them towards the changing realities of environment.
First of all, I would like to appreciate the topic you have chosen. It's a wonderful talk about, because we are a nation of around 220 million, more than 220 million people. And I would say that unfortunately it's a 220 million people who are comparatively purposeless and directionless, having no specific direction, in fact, and moving in every area. But at the end of the day, we are on the same position. So if you ask me one thing, that why Pakistan and why we couldn't grow to the level where we should be ideally, is the lack of leadership, the depth of leadership. And in every area, it's not a political leadership, it's the religious leadership, it's a social leadership, it's the business leadership. We were unable to produce that kind of leadership. So it's very important, and I would appreciate. And I've been very closely associated with this youth leadership. And I've been running a leadership club, youth leadership club, with the name of Empower Up, and that was totally free of cost, based at Islamabad for more than 2 years. And then I was more busy in different assignments, and where we used to invite the young people, young students, and the young professionals, where they used to come up every week for at least 2 hours. We used to talk about the international leaders and the business leaders and how the organizations and the country grow. And to be very honest, that was wonderful, and that was really helping them to grow in their professional career. And a very interesting example, let me share with you. A few days back, I received a call from one of my old student from Afghanistan.
Right.
He said that, sir, I'm in Afghanistan. I said, what are you doing there? He used to be based at Timargara. He was on our sales team. So he said that in one of your lecture, you mentioned about the leadership and about the resources we have.
Right.
That we human beings, we are blessed with so many resources around, but unfortunately, we do not pay heed to that. We do not have that much of awareness. So he quit the job, and then he went to Afghanistan, because Timargara culture is more closer to Afghanistan. And now he's final year MBBS student. And just before his first surgery, he called me. So it was about, he had the resources, but he did not have the guidelines. So the moment he got that idea, he went, and now he is a doctor. So it is such an important thing to talk about. But when we talk about leadership here, right, first the leadership, and then we'll talk about the future leaders. We have got some, a ridiculously funny definition of the leadership. Which is in fact, who is leader in our setting, in our and in mostly developing countries. The leader is somebody who has got the million of followers. The leader is somebody who has got the hato bacho, the protocol and the security and the chartered planes and the helicopter and the big cars and the resources, and the millions of people to defend that person, to serve the leader. To serve the leader and his or her family members. So this is what which is entirely an opposite concept. Leadership is what? Leadership is not about yourself. It's about other people.
Okay, so let's talk about the leadership and the role of the young people, especially when it comes to the SDGs. So it is said that we do not inherit Earth from our ancestors, rather we borrow it from our children, right? And this is why it is very much important to keep the conversations on the sustainable development goals and align them with the young people, because I think the young people have seen the vast effects of the climate change, the very, adversarial effects of the climate change. So how can we make sure that we engage our youth in those conversations and keep them on the track, and especially on the green conversations?
Wonderful. First, as I mentioned about the leadership, why? Because for that matter, first of all, we have to understand what is leadership. That's why I, preambled that. So without understanding of the leadership, we cannot actually give this concept to the children's. So yes, you very rightly mentioned that children's, as their future, they have to spend their lives, so they need to understand, they need to embark on all the things. If you just take, as we mostly the concept we borrow from the international, the developed countries, you talk about the leadership, what happens in Britain. The way they develop their young leaders, what they do, the youth leadership from the different constituencies, they elect the leaders, which they call, their youth parliament. And then they develop them, they engage them in different social issues, where they talk about the youth problems, they talk about the jobs, they talk about the entrepreneurship, they talk about the different things, and they bring those issues to the table and to the decision makers, and then those decision makers, based on those analysis and those findings, they make the decisions. So it's very rightly mentioned that they have to live the life, their future belongs to them. So we need to give them the space, we need to give them the awareness. But for that matter, a very important thing is that we need to have the understanding in the first place. I'm in the business, corporate business, for the last more than 2 decades.
Right.
And to be very honest, what we people, we used to talk about the international leaders and international books and, you know, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. But when it comes to our organizations, we even do not give space to the junior leaders.
Right.
We do not allow the young peoples to come in, to chip in their energies, their resources, so that they can produce. They are much better than what we are, in fact.
True, true.
But we don't let them. And there is a term we used to call it biggest dog syndrome.
Right.
And what is that biggest dog syndrome? Biggest dog syndrome is that, you know, a big dog let the other dogs grow up to a level, but when he feels physically threatened,
Right.
you know, he starts charging against those, and then they have to quit. So similarly, this is what we are doing in our different institutions and different areas in business and everything, that we don't let the young people to come up.
Right.
And deliberately we do that. And we do not want to leave those positions. If somebody is, you know, the CEO, he's CEO for the last 20 years.
True.
So this is so unfortunate.
Right.
So unless and until we do not quit these practices, you know, young people cannot come up.
True.
and they can deliver.
Right.
Actually, we are deliberately, and this is the real time I'm giving you this. We are deliberately suppressing them. We
Right.
do not want. One of the biggest trait of the leadership is that they want quality people around, so
Right.
that they can. Leader does not mean that you are the smartest guy in your room.
Right.
In your you know, strategy making, there are so many people that are better, but the quality and the trait of the leader is to keep quality people around, give them this platform, conducive environment, so that they can grow, and you learn from those people, and that's how you collectively learn, and that's how you collectively grow. So this is what.
Okay, wonderful. So you were talking about the dog syndrome, right? The big dog syndrome, pardon. And just this thought hit me that about the glass ceiling syndrome, especially in the corporate world, about women are how they're not allowed to go about the certain position because all the top positions of the CEOs are occupied by the men, right? So I really wanted to ask you, do you feel there are enough conversations happening around the status of the women inside our country or in the world? Because you see that how there are a lot of protests going on, feminist protests across the world, and I do feel that that's a very selective application of the feminism, because the same thing when it was happening in the France when there was a hijab ban, or maybe in our neighboring country, no one spoke out it, no one, I mean, protested on such a massive scale as they are being protested right now. So when it comes to the conversations around the young women, do you think there are enough conversations going on?
I don't think so, because, and it's not only Pakistan. Previously, we were talking about leadership in Pakistan and its different areas.
Right.
But even if you talk about the women leadership internationally, if you
Right.
you know, Fortune 500 companies, you see there are very you know, I name any company which is led by a young woman or a woman. Mostly these positions are actually you said occupied. I would say I vote that. Use that word, but in fact those positions are, you know, with the men, in fact. So it's very rightly you said. I don't know what is the reason behind. Might be the male are the better administrators.
Okay, debatable.
It's a debatable thing.
Okay.
But I personally feel that the women should given better positions.
Right.
They are even more responsible. They have
Right.
got the better caliber, and equal opportunities should be given.
Right.
Yes, but your question is that there is no such debate. We are still having those, you know, 50 years back state of the mind. We still want to occupy. You're talking about the women. I'm saying that we don't want to, you know, give positions to to the men as well,
Right.
to the young people.
Right.
So there is no such debate. Yes, this point is very valid. Unless and until we have this biasness, you know, gender inequality, we cannot have you know, the talent come up to their positions, because the female, they are very good, because in our workplace we have got so many women working with us. They are very good. If I rate, the women are more responsible. This is my personal experience. It's not based on any study. They are more experienced and they're more responsible, I would say, as compared to men.
Okay.
But yes, I agree that there are no as opportunities available for them.
True,
And
true.
even internationally, they are not, you know, being awarded with such opportunities.
Right, right. And we also need to make sure that we have such sort of conversations regarding the status of women who are not very much tarnished by the selective application of the feminism or very, I would say, hegemonic feminism, right? Because we have seen that how the mantra of the women's right were used for the intervention in Afghanistan and how that turned up. So coming back to technology, right? And we have seen that in a very fast-paced 21st century where digitalization is taking place and technology is playing a very fundamental role in our lives. And I think that in future there are a lot of jobs are going to be created which are not even present now because of the advancement in technology. So how can we leverage technology so that the problems faced by the young people can be tackled?
Well, I do agree with the fact that this technology, but I would relate one more thing and add one more thing, that when we talk about the technology and we talk about the resources and so much resources in the world, and I would relate with the leadership that when we talk about the leaders, you see that every day around 1.3 billion tons of food wasted every day.
Right.
We have got so much of technology you talk about, we have got so much of the resources, but this is one of the example of the poor leadership, that 10,000 people die every day because of the food problem, the food crisis, the food shortages. On the one side, we have got so much of the resources we are wasting, and on the other hand, the people dying because of the deficiency and because of the food crisis. So yes, we have to connect all this, and to connect all this, we definitely need a lot of technology. But before that, one step back, we need this intent, and we need this world needs to be led by the true leaders. Right now, if I say, I don't know, as per your policy, you can say it or not, but I used to talk very openly. This world at the moment, this world is not led by, very true leaders. It is led by mostly the selfish kind of leaders.
True.
Why it is so? Because they think that they are responsible for only this domain, this much of territory. They are responsible for 100 million or 200 million people, and that's it. For them, they have to take it. Of course, this is their primary responsibility, but being a selfless leader, you have to think about the humanity.
True.
You need to think beyond all these lines and all these numbers and the territorial and the demography. You need to think on the bigger side and for the humanity, and that's how you can make this world a better place.
Right. So talking about the youth leadership and the problems which some of the young people face. So when I was doing my research on it, I came across this fact that the depression, or I would say the suicidal rates are rising across the young people in the world. And if you convert its numerical or economic value, you would see that it is very much affecting or hampering the productivity when it comes to the business environment or the economy as a whole. So why do you think that young people are, nowadays the depression is on the rise in the young people, and we've also seen that a lot of young people, they're going towards this substance or the drug abuse. How to tackle this?
It's a wonderful and very relevant question because we are actually, our students are our burden.
True.
What we talk about, we are talking about the GPS, we are talking about the 90%, the more and the 90% marks. Even a few days back, I had a session with my eldest boy and I was talking at least to get 95% marks. So means we are more engaged in these kind of things. We are not actually, and again, this is the lack of awareness we have. What we expect them to be, like the machines to get the marks. And what will happen after 5 years? Now they're getting 95% marks, 96. So what we expect them to get the 100% marks? So the students are so much occupied in the student, they have so much of competition. So the better is we need to give them the alternates.
True. Right. So we have seen that, Asif, nowadays there's so much wealth of information because of the social media, and I would say there's a dearth of wisdom out there, right? And we have seen that the COVID has hit, then there was inflation, and then there's a global warming, and the youth has actually seen the adversarial effects of that, right? So social indicators are not doing that much great. So in such sort of environment, how can we make an environment which is conducive enough towards gearing towards the resiliency of the youth, and they're more adaptable to such kind of challenges?
For that matter, we need to work on their character building, in fact, which is
Right.
right at the beginning.
Right.
Because you very rightly mentioned that this world, what we have experienced so far, it would be entirely a different place in days to come. The natural catastrophes and the other problems we'll be facing in days to come, the world would be a very different place. Our students would be, and the young people would be exposed to much more and the bigger challenges in days to come. So for that matter, what is more important, that we need to work on their character building right at the beginning. So for that matter, the parents' responsibility in the first place, we need to, actually the leaders,
Right.
if you relate with the leadership, for the leaders, two C's are very important. One is their character and the second one is their competence.
Right.
Character is what? Character is their credibility. It's being trustworthiness. It's being candor, candidness,
Right.
care, love. So all these are, the elements of the character. And the second one is then competence. It's about your technical knowledge and skills and all that kind of stuff. So we need to work on their character building, and that's how we can make them more resilient, and they can then in the challenge they'll face in days to come, they'll perform in a much better way.
Right. Thank you so much. And when we talk about the character building, especially of the young people, and at the starting of this segment, I mentioned that 60% of our population falls under the category of the young people. So I do feel that we need to incorporate the ideas of Islam in the character building of our youth, and the Islam, which I always say, the Islam of Iqbal, Islam of the Rumi, not the very narrowistic interpretations or very Islamophobic interpretations which are depicted in the mainstream Western media. We do not need to go there. So I think for such kind of inspiration, Islam is the best sort of inspiration, right? So with that, we will end our program. And until next time, it's a goodbye and good morning.